Patrick Christie's here at Westmonster. I'm joined today in the studio with David Morris, the Conservative MP for Morecambe and Leesdale. Pleasure to have you here, David. Thank you for getting involved.
Thank you for inviting me.
All right, we're here to talk about Momentum, and that's the Labour grassroots movement, if you could call it that, I suppose. And they've been accused of some rather underhand tactics at the last election, which I understand that you had some negative experiences of yourself. I was hoping you might be able to tell us kind of what your experiences were, how it all began for you with Momentum, really.
Yeah, of course. I mean, all MPs, Conservative MPs, had this in some form or shape or degree of, severity. I would say that I had a moderate targeting, shall we say. To give you a bit of my background, I'm from a place that's sort of halfway between Manchester and Liverpool. I can remember militant tendency in Liverpool in the 1980s. It's identical. Momentum isn't the People's Momentum, it's Jeremy Corbyn 2015, renamed. It's all on Companies House website, check it out, it's all there. It's anything but the People's Momentum. It's basically a new Mosleite movement that's got at the back of Jeremy Corbyn. A lot of my colleagues say it was like flicking a switch when the general election came. It was just basically smear campaigns. I know that, we had a case ourselves where we contacted someone who had the same maiden name, shall we say, as a candidate who came against me, who admitted that he'd worked with the candidate on the misinformation website, which was called Where's Morris? It didn't just happen to me, it happened to my friend James Wharton, who sadly lost his seat. It was identical. It was obviously done from some sort of central command that the Labour Party had a hand in. And again, these are all issues that have to be addressed because it contravenes the Transparency of Lobbying Act, the Third Parties Act. None of this was signed up with the Labour Party as far as I'm aware. In fact, I don't think Momentum signed up with the Labour Party. You hear about these third-party action groups, like we've had the famous Battle Bus, the Conservatives, but nobody seems to be looking into the activities of Momentum, which is really Jeremy Corbyn 2015 under a different brand.
So what makes you think that the actions that went on in your constituency, Morecambe and Leesdale, were centrally organised, I suppose? Were you seeing them happen across the country, or what made you think that?
It was funny. I was phoning up other colleagues across the country. They were telling me the same things were being used, the same language. For the sake of our interview, they're all four-letter words.
Our viewers are very
well, they are all four-letter words.
Yeah.
The one that you can repeat quite easily is evil. Evil was always the one that came up. I did a hustings on the prom in broad daylight with the BBC. Momentum tipped up, combined with militant teachers. There was only a small clutch of them in my area. They all had links back to the Labour Party locally. In fact, you just have to look on the Facebook pages to see that they had links to the Labour Party full stop. It was all there. They were shouting, screaming, calling me names as the interview was going on. One guy pushed his bike wheel between me and the interviewer and called me a CUNT live on air. Wow. He was pushed back. The staff of the BBC, local BBC, looked quite frightened. In fact, the interviewer said to me afterwards that he was putting the complaint to Labour High Command about it because it wasn't democracy in action, it was rent-a-mob, which is exactly what it was. In fact, as I was walking away, they were shouting and screaming all kinds of stuff at me. One of the teachers said, go and spend time with your bank balance, which I thought was hilarious because she was actually earning more money than I was. But there you go. So this is the kind of tactics that were being employed. And it was just bizarre because they were looking at you like a frenzied pack of animals. It was very distasteful, and not only distasteful, uncomfortable.
And where do you think this is coming from then? I mean, in terms of, do you think this is coming right from the top in the Labour Party, or what's your opinion
most definitely, without a doubt. I was on a car park near my house in Heysham. I was walking back to my car. There was a beautiful black BMW parked up at the side of my car. When I got close to it, there was a deputy head teacher, former deputy head teacher, in actually the village where I live. I knew him. I'm as far away from him as I am from you. And he would come out with a string of abuse at me. I thought he was actually going to attack me, but I think the tactic was he wanted me to react to him. I didn't say anything. I got in the car, did report it to the police. When the police actually tracked him down, it turned out that he wasn't the deputy head anymore of the local school. He'd actually gone working in London and was chief executive of some educational institution, which turned out to be just a web page. It was a front for the Labour Party. He actually denied being there. He deleted his social media. But, putting it bluntly, he left one on there to say that he was in the area, which he overlooked. So you could tell that he was in the area. He denied it to the police. He denied he drove a black BMW. It was probably a staff car of some sort. He said he drove a Ford car. But I saw him the other day driving the BMW on the bypass, so I know he's back in the area. And I think he was coming up to the area to stare at the militant teachers.
I mean, this is all quite serious stuff, really. I mean, what do you think should happen in terms of, should there be some kind of investigation in this? If you're thinking it is coming from the top of the Labour Party, centrally organised, really people should be scrutinising this, because it's very frightening for everyone. It's kind of one step away from real physical abuse, isn't it?
Well, a few weeks ago I was in America, in Washington. I had a meeting with Google. Google are trying to do something about this. You can't blame the search engines. You can't really blame the internet, because the internet, by and large, is very hard to police because of the nature of how it actually works. But it should be covered. I mean, it is covered in certain acts of the third party, Transparency and Lobbying Act. We need a proper investigation and the people to be brought to book on this. If they've been miscreants in their dealings, they should be brought to book. But the fact remains that you've got a militant organisation which is very, very similar to what was going on in Britain in the 1930s. The historical parallels are uncanny between Mosley and Corbyn. And, we've got militant tendency backed up by a communist agenda. And it's frightening because, if that is the kind of behaviour that's happening on the streets with, albeit organised clutches of activists, what would the country be like with a man like that in control?
That's it. And I mean, are you concerned that, say, obviously we don't know when the next election will be, but there will be one eventually, and are you concerned that this is kind of a natural progression? There may well end up flicking that switch and it does turn physical as opposed to being verbal and just kind of in your face at the minute. I mean, is that a concern for you? Or?
Well, very much so. I mean, I've been in politics a very long time. I've seen quite a few elections and general elections. I've never seen anything as sinister as this. This was very, very orchestrated. There was no policy exchange. It was just name-calling, nasty, verbal vitriol. There was nothing reflective in our democracy. And it was funny because we had a Westminster Hall debate. In fact, at my count, the shadow constitutional affairs for the Labour Party is the MP next door to me. You can hear quite clearly her shouting and screaming over me when I was making my maiden speech, if you like, to accept that I'm the new MP, even though I've been there for nearly 10 years, from 2017 onwards. Yeah. You could actually hear it. It's there for all to hear. In fact, it was edited on the local radio. It got that bawdy. Yeah. Now, this is just extraordinary. And, she actually said in the Westminster Hall debate that this kind of behaviour would be reported to Labour High Command. Perhaps she should report herself for it because, she was leading her rabble. That's what they really were in there, on shouting and screaming at the newly elected MP that's been there, established, and actually had a track record, which I might add the Labour Party are just denigrating. I mean, at the end of the day, Marxism, the first principle of Marxism is to rewrite history. And that's what they try to do. They try to rubbish what you've done, try to say you've not done it, try to claim credit for what you've done. And, rewriting history is not the way to go in British society.
Absolutely. Now, you're part of a new committee, the Public Administration and Constitutional Affairs Committee. But it's easy for me to say. But you're looking into this issue, aren't you, really? And if it is found that Momentum has overstepped the boundaries, which it does look like, we did a lot of stories in the run-up to the election about defacing of boards and verbal abuse. If it is found that has happened and that it is some form of centrally organised process that goes right to the top of the Labour Party, I mean, what do you think should happen, really? I mean, just kind of thing where head should roll, surely. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, the law is the law, and there are laws there already to protect us. Now, they should be enforced. Now, I can say this categorically. If I can find any evidence that stacks up against the third party actor that links in with any law, I'm the first to actually enforce it. I will be pushing that through to the Electoral Commission. It is the Electoral Commission that should be looking into these matters. There is a report being headed up by Simon Hart MP that's looking into this. In fact, this interview will probably be fed into his report. But the truth of the matter is, we can't be allowed to have our democracy sullied in such a way and end up in what is fascist tendency. That's exactly what it is.
And just lastly, David, before I let you get going, but obviously we heard an announcement yesterday from Jeremy Corbyn that he's urging all his MPs to vote against the EU withdrawal bill. I was just keen to get your take on that. We couldn't let you go without talk a little bit about Brexit here at Westmonster. So what are your opinions on his views there?
Well, I think his views are misguided. Don't forget, at the last general election, what we saw was the collapse of UKIP. It was polarised into a two-horse race. What we did see was a lot of UKIP voters, ironically, sided with the Labour cause, which is to really keep us in Europe, which is something I just can't get my head around. But that's what did happen. It's not me saying it as a political, pundit. You just have to look at the results and work out where the votes came from and where they went. Corbyn's really skating on thin ice, because if he thinks that his popularity is based on him and not a protest vote where people thought, well, we've got our Brexit now, we can go and vote elsewhere, those voters will soon be going back to where they came from, shall we say, because they're realising that Jeremy Corbyn is not for us leaving Europe.
Thank you very much, David. It's been a pleasure to have you here, and hopefully we'll speak to you again soon at Westmonster. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick.